If you think you felt a great disturbance in the Force, you're not wrong. Ed Gross and me, Mark A. Altman, have a new oral history coming out this July from St. Martin's Press. It's Secrets of the Force, the complete, uncensored, unauthorized oral history of the Star Wars saga. So wherever you buy books, audio, and video, pick it up today, pre-order, and you can learn the secrets of the Force. And don't miss our oral history of Star Trek in stores now. And of course, nobody does it better. The complete oral history of James Bond in digital, hardcover, paperback, and audio. That is all.
If you're a fan of the 430 movie, you'll love Best Movies Never Made, hosted by myself, Josh Miller.
And Steven Scarlatta,
where we explore some of the greatest movies never made, like E.T. 2,
Johnny Quest,
Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian,
and Halloween 3D.
New episodes available every other Monday, wherever you listen to podcasts.
If you like Inglorious Treksperts, you're going to love our new Treksperts Briefing Room, where Darren and myself curate classic episodes of Star Trek with special guests from various Star Trek series talking about the episodes you love.
I think that sounds great.
I can't wait to do it.
Let's go see.
What episodes are we doing, Darren?
Well, we don't want to give it away.
Okay. Well, then you need to watch Treksperts Briefing Room wherever you listen to Inglorious Treksperts and on the new Treksperts Briefing Room podcast feed. Don't miss it. Coming intermittently in the coming weeks. Treksperts Briefing Room. It's what every real Trekspert needs. Hey, this is Mark A. Altman, and this is the 430 movie live at San Diego as we program 1981 week. 1981, it was a great year for movies. I want to introduce you to this fabulous panel. This is a real milestone for all of us because we started these panels, these curating classics from seminal film years 10 years ago. We did 1982. We did our first, we had done panels at Comic-Con, but never had done this specific panel. It was a huge success, the 1982 panel, Greatest Geek Year Ever. Then we did 1983, Greatest Geek Year Ever. Then we did 1984, Greatest Geek Year Ever. And we hit for the cycle. We got to 1989, and it was so great that they didn't hold Comic-Con for the next 2 years because what could top that great panel? So now we're back for Comic-Con at home with 1981. We a lot of thought went into this because we're like, do we go to 1991? Do we do 30? It was 30 years ago, or do we go back to 1981 and go back 40 years in the Wayback Machine? Well, it didn't take long for us to come to a consensus. It was going to be 1981 because the 80s are way cooler than the 90s. Sorry, millennials. Gen X rules. Woo! Okay.
I hate to interrupt you, Mark, but those people over there, you can't come through the kitchen that way. You got to go back around and through those other two bedrooms. You can't come in this way. That's an exit only. Thank you. Sorry.
Darren, you're a director. Your people know their jobs. And they're already saying 10 minutes left. 10 minutes left. Okay.
And they gave me a little sign reminding me that some members of our audience are under the age of 18 years old. And so I should not say so much.
How did they know to give it to you?
Okay, are you kidding? Are you kidding? I've been dropping the F-bomb for like 20 years.
Well, first, before we get into this 1981, what a wonderful year it was for movies, I want to introduce you not only to your regular Comic-Con stalwarts, but your 430 movie podcast hosts. And on the 430 movie, what we do is we curate a fantasy theme week of classic movies in the tradition of the great 430 movie of our youth, where they would do great theme weeks like Godzilla Week and fantastic, Inside the Body Week. I don't know, Fantastic Journey, right? Planet of the Apes Week. Planet of the Apes Week. That was the classic, Planet of the Apes Week. So we've taken that one step further for the last 4 seasons. We've been programming theme weeks, We've done everything from actors, great actors like Humphrey Bogart, Harrison Ford, to Music to My Ears Week, great scores. We've done Superhero Week. We've done Disney Week. We've done all kinds of stuff.
Time travel
week, time travel, alien invasion week. We've covered a lot, and we're not even close to running out. And this week's a little different because we're doing a year 1981 because it's Comic-Con, baby. So let me introduce you to Mr. Monday. We know him here at the show. He's a writer for such shows as X-Men, the animated series. He worked on Batman, The Brave and the Bold. He's well known for being in a galaxy far, far away. A long time ago, he worked on the Clone Wars, Star Wars Rebels. Of course, I'm speaking of Mr. Stephen Melching.
Hi there. By being on this panel, does that mean I can get a couple of VIP tickets to the masquerade?
Yeah, you're going to be the only one there, unfortunately. But, you can be sure to get in. The great thing is there's no waiting for tables at any of the restaurants in San Diego this weekend. So we should all drive down there and have dinner. Okay.
2 words.
So
Sailor Moon.
Oh, my God. Okay. So on Tuesday, you know him as a concept designer for such shows as Westworld, movies like Master and Commander and Riddick. And he's also the visual effects supervisor on the Star Trek The Motion Picture Director's Edition. And the beauty of it is we hope it will be again. That is Mr. DAREN R. Dochterman.
Welcome. Thank you so much. It's good to be here on Tuesday.
And on Wednesday, I'm a little tentative because you never know what's going to happen on Wednesday. As Mickey Rourke said in Angel Heart, it's anything can happen day. And that, of course, he is the showrunner of DOTA, Dragon's Blood. I like to say Dragon's Domain, but Dragon's Blood on Netflix. He's written such movies as X-Men First Class and THOR. He worked on Fringe and Black Sails. And he's still working on Wednesday. One day he'll get it right. Mr. Ashley Edward Miller.
Thank you. It's great to be here once again. Although I will admit that I am still stuck back on Inside the Body Week. And I am really trying to get my head around that one. Working on my pick as we speak. So
behind the green door count that week.
It was a long drive down from Los Angeles. I had a lot of traffic come to Comic-Con. I barely made it. I went to the wrong room. I was in 6A and I was supposed to be in 6DE. And so I'm very confused.
I'm just fascinated
in my normal state.
I'm just fascinated to find out and count how many times Mark uses the word curate tonight.
I like that word.
I know.
It's a good word.
It's a good word.
It's a good word because
so far it's 3.
Good word.
We should have a little number in the corner.
The curate tally.
Because I think curate is a word that reflects people of certain expertise that
it's informed guidance.
It's informed guidance. It's a good way of putting it, as opposed to just throwing a bunch of crap against the wall and seeing what sticks.
Also known as Wednesday.
Also known as algorithms. So I'm a big fan of curated content.
And of course, on Thursday we have the showrunner of many of your favorite shows.
Where is he?
Including Pandora. And he also is the producer, writer of Free Enterprise, and author of so many oral history books that you can't count them anymore. His name is Mark A. Altman.
Oh, thank you.
Behind the green door.
I had a feeling you were going to go there. No, it's books, for instance.
Oral history, I thought.
Oral histories of Star Trek, the 50-year mission from St. Martin's Press, film on hardcover, digital, and audio. And just hitting stands this month. Very proud of it, particularly Secrets of the Force, an oral history of the Star Wars saga, the entire Star Wars saga in one book. Also audio, hardcover, audio, and digital. And last year was Nobody Does It Better. I was so excited to come down to San Diego and talk about it, but there was no San Diego. So I didn't get to talk about it. So before we talk about 1981, which is really a pretty remarkable year for movies, as I think we're going to discover. I just want to talk about, because we are doing this live on tape for Comic-Con, and I just want to talk about how special Comic-Con is and how much we miss it and how much we're looking forward to being back next year with all of you live and in person. I don't think we'll be complaining about waiting for a table at any restaurants or because it'll just be so nice to be back at Comic-Con. What's a Comic-Con memory that you have, Steve Melching?
Oh, dear God. I mean, I've been coming down, I want to say 93 was my first Comic-Con. I drove down for the day. And then I think 94 was the first time I stayed overnight for a Comic-Con. And I think by 95 or 6, I was there for the whole thing. And I haven't missed one since then. And, I was really sad to miss last year because of the pandemic, but looking forward to coming back whenever it's back at full strength. I probably won't be at the low calorie special edition Thanksgiving weekend. Not a great weekend for me, but oh gosh, so many memories. I a lot of them are the kind of things you don't want to talk about in a podcast. They're just too weird. I've just seen so many people, including someone that worked on my pick for the week. I saw him at Comic-Con a couple times. So
okay, great. Well, we'll talk about that.
It's so much fun. I just love shopping in the dealer's room for in the days before eBay, especially when you could actually kind of get your hands on the things and see stuff you hadn't seen in decades, old collectibles and stuff, and seeing all kinds of great guest speakers telling stories. And
it's really remarkable to see how Comic-Con has evolved. I mean, I remember the speculator mania of the 90s, where there were all these huge comic book companies that no longer exist, like Techno Comics and Big Comics and all these people, and then it became, huge movie companies were there. And then it became about television and now you sort of see video games making their entree and virtual reality. And it's really incredible the way that it mirrors the popular culture. And, I've been going like you since the early 90s. And it's remarkable because as much as it changes and evolves, there's something very special because there's something for everyone there. And now, I find my kids, just as I felt like, how many more years am I going to keep going? My kids are so anxious. They had such a great time going to their first Comic-Con, a couple years ago. And then, of course, the pandemic put it on hiatus. But they can't wait to go back and to go to the masquerade and hit the dealer's room. I can wait for them to hit the dealer's room and things like that. So, it's just been a wonderful opportunity. And of course, I can't even count how many panels we've done over the years. Obviously, something really special that we've done every year is the Starship Smackdown. And I know we felt there were times where we're doing 2 of them a year, and sometimes we would do even 2 over one Comic-Con. We do Robot Rumble and Starship Smackdown. So I do like the idea that when we come back next year, we'll be coming really fresh. It'll be like 2 years since we've done, Starship Smackdown. We're gonna have all new jokes by then. It's gonna be great.
Right. I feel like we're gonna need a good like Rocky IV training montage, to get back into shape for Starship Smackdown.
Oh my God, and some special guests. For sure. I think we're gonna have to bring some real Starship captains to that one. Okay, so Darren Dochterman, what about you with special Comic-Con memories?
Well, I mean, for me, the experience was not mainly the exhibition hall, but hanging out in the various watering holes of the local hotels, specifically the Marriott next door. We had an encampment in the Green Bar in the North Tower, and it was so much fun. Of course, the most famous time that happened, we were sitting there, we got a VCR from somewhere, and we're watching Star Trek episodes at 2 a.m. And our friend who was hanging around, Dan Poole, Spider Dan Poole, who made this amazing fan film of Spider-Man, where he's doing all these stunts himself and nearly killing himself, jumping onto cars and swinging.
Literally swinging from buildings.
Real buildings. Insane, but he's so much fun to hang out with. And, his dream was to meet Stan Lee. And of course, he'd been talking about it all weekend. He said, "Oh my God, I got to find Stan Lee. He's amazing. I got to talk to him." Not once, but twice. He has to step away from the group. He has to go to his room or something. And down the hall comes Stan Lee. He walks by us all, "Excelsior!" and then walks back to his elevator. And then, Dan comes back and says, "Guess what?" He says, "What?" And we say, "Stan Lee was here." He said, "What?" And so he goes to the bathroom or something. And again, Stan Lee comes the other way. "Excelsior!" And then he's gone. And of course, Dan comes back and we didn't have the heart to tell him again. But just wonderful sort of moments like that cannot be duplicated ever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I have such fond memories of, promoting our first movie there when we had Free Enterprise at Comic-Con, and, so many opportunities to be there with different TV shows and different movies. And so, meeting so many people, there's this great sense of camaraderie among your fellow geeks, for lack of a better word. And it has, it's been very special. And for those of us in the business, there's also a lot of business that gets done there. It's almost like a trade show. But I mean, and speaking of, I was going to Comic-Con when it was a trade show. When the first couple of days was right when I was doing Sci-Fi Universe for the late Larry Flint. And for 2 days, they would have a trade show, and they'd have these parties off at the zoo. They'd truck us all out on buses, and then it expanded to more days. But I mean, that's how long I've been going, and it was always a great experience because it was like the calm before the storm. The trade show was a couple hundred people, not a couple, maybe 1,000 or 2,000, and then all of a sudden on Thursday it would explode when everybody would start to show up. And I think the other thing we love about San Diego Comic-Con is it looks like Bespin. You can't be there without thinking, "My God, I feel like I'm on Bespin." So, but everything from yacht parties on yachts to, In Search of Larry Ahern, put the search for Spock to shame. This was a manager at the Marriott. We were having a problem with some of the staff, and he said, "Oh, you need to talk to the manager." It's like, "Get me Larry Ahern." For years, it became a recurring joke. He'd long left the Marriott, but we would demand to see Larry Ahern. But it was, and I think a lot of our friendships deepened as a result of the time spent at Comic-Con. I mean, and some great moments. So, Ashley, what about you? What resonates for you at Comic-Con before we start to jump into 1981?
Oh my God, Comic-Con is like, I show up at Comic-Con and I feel like a weirdness magnet. I mean, first of all, Comic-Con is, I think, how I ingratiated myself with you maniacs. And which I am so incredibly thankful for. But I can point to so many strange little incidents, like the time that I was pressed into service impersonating a celebrity to get into a party. Successfully impersonated the celebrity, and then found myself in a limousine with an executive who thought I was the celebrity. That was fun. Then there was the time I was at a party, and I went off with one of the hostesses at the party to help her get beer because I was just being a nice guy. And I randomly got pressed into service directing pornography. I don't know how it happened, but it did. And then, and because we brought Stan Lee into it, we didn't bring Stan Lee into the pornography.
What?
I held up my pinky because I'm classy.
That's a whole different Peter Parker.
No, look, I'd met Stan Lee a couple of times, but Stan was older than hell even then, and never remembered anything. And it was my eldest son had just turned 2. And we had dropped him off. We were over at the con. We dropped him off at their daycare. We had him in a stroller. We were taking him down a special elevator that you had to use to go to the daycare site. And we're alone on the elevator. Stan Lee gets on. And Stan Lee looks over at Caden and he goes, "Hello, baby." And then the doors open and he walks out. And I was like, that's like a blessing on you, kid. Like, you have no idea how awesome your life is. And then there was a whole Neil deGrasse Tyson incident, but yeah, I mean, those are the things that jump out for me.
Well, that was one of the highlights, obviously, of we're doing Starship SmackDown that year, and Neil deGrasse Tyson made that passionate case for the Starship Enterprise winning Starship SmackDown, which had never happened before. Wait a second. It always happened.
The thing that boggled my mind is that right before we went on stage, one of the panelists came up and said, Neil deGrasse Tyson is in the audience over there. I'm like, what? Are you shitting? Like, I couldn't imagine he's going to sit still for this nonsense. And we went up there, we do the panel, and it was like 2 hours, a full 2 hours later, he approaches the microphone and starts addressing us. I couldn't believe he sat in that crowd for 2 hours.
Well, I was wearing sunglasses and was drunk out of my mind. So I had no idea who was at the microphone until I took my sunglasses off.
Well, and also what was amazing about SmackDown, if you look at it, we've been doing that for, I think, over 15 years, maybe 20 years. And when that started, it was in a small little room and we were turning people away, but it was a couple hundred people. You know, over the years, they kept giving us bigger and bigger rooms. And, you know, now it's sort of like the, it's the big finale on the weekend with thousands of people. And people come back year after year after year. And it's wonderful. And it's really, as much as I dismiss it and joke about it, it's wonderful. And I'm so deeply appreciative to everyone at Comic-Con who has been so supportive to us all these years in terms of supporting all our craziness, because, you know, they indulged us and you know, we managed to turn it into something wonderful.
Even the people holding the big 15 minutes left signs. Knowing very well that we were not paying attention to them.
We were just ignoring them outright. But we always saw the same guys.
Yeah.
It was always the same guys.
Right. And they know, they look at us and they just know, oh God, here they go. we know they're not going to listen. But it's a tough job. They got a tough job and I'm sympathetic. So 1981. You know, when I was preparing for this episode, which I don't often do, but Steve does, I realized what an extraordinary year for movies this was.
Yeah.
Steve, can you sort of tee up 1981 for us, just in terms of, you know, the decade had just we were coming off that 1980. It was a very this is what we came to know as the 80s, the me decade, the selfish. Greed is good. You know, Ronald Reagan. The Falklands War would be the next year. But what can you tell us about 1981?
Well, I mean, you just mentioned a lot of it. You know, we were coming out of the sort of the melees of the 70s, the energy crisis and Watergate and the Vietnam War ending and all that sort of thing, and then of course we had the emergence of the blockbuster Hollywood film with Jaws in 1976 and Star Wars in 1977, certainly kicking off a whole new era in popular film, in Western film at any rate. And by the 80s, you know, Ronald Reagan is in office and it's America is feeling resurgent again, and Hollywood is conquering the world. And we're seeing a lot of films being made by this time that sort of fulfilled the promise of 1977. Like a lot of the studios, you might say, learned the wrong lessons from 1977 and just started throwing any kind of movie into production that's got visual effects and outer space and fantasy and stuff like that. And there was some great results that we started to see by this time, and certainly by the following year, 1982, I think it reached full blossom. But it was an exciting time. It was an experimental time. A lot of the franchises that we are still enjoying today, that are films that are still sequels and reboots and prequels, we're still seeing the fallout from the films of the 80s. And it really got started in 81.
It's so interesting what you say, because I think that with 1982, which of course we'll talk about next year, which is, you know, E.T. and Blade Runner and Star Trek 2,
spoiler.
You know, truly the great, yeah, spoiler alert, the greatest geek year ever. That is when the 80s emerge full as what we know as the 80s, and continues through 83 and 84 and all. 81 is almost, and I don't mean this, the hangover from the 70s. There's a seriousness to these films that very much feel like they're still the children of the 70s. It's not quite what we think of as an 80s film. So
it's a transitionary period.
It's a very transitional period. Whereas, by 82, it definitely feels like these are 80s movies, or what we have come to know as 80s movies. So these are sort of like 70s plus. So I'm going to be
70s movies with a modern sort of visual effects Hollywood aesthetic to them that are the content is still gestating and about to emerge into the 80s.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I think that people don't realize who are younger is this is when movies could play in theaters for a year and a half. They opened even on, a couple hundred screens was like a wide release. And
like 2021.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But it wasn't like later on where things would play, be in multiplexes and they play for a couple weeks and, a couple months later they'd be on home video. So, I mean, Superman 2 was still playing well into 1981. And it had opened in late 1980, so you still had a lot of movies from the 80s that are still playing deep into 1981. And a lot of these movies came in 1981, were playing deep into 1982. And then some came and went, and we'll talk about those. So as well as the ones that are more successful. Now on the show, on this podcast, we don't just pick movies that are successful. We pick films that we love or respect or just think are gonzo and feel like they deserve the recognition. We try to program a week that complements each other until we get to Friday. And then as a group, we sort of come up with what Friday's pick will be. So you can actually program this week yourself. Most of these movies are available on streaming, on Blu-ray, and you can actually follow along at home when you hear the tone. So let's start with Mr. Monday, Steve Melching, with our first pick of 1981 week. And before I say that, one last thing. Normally on the show, we try not to repeat movies that have been picked before. Because this is a special Comic-Con at home, the deal is off. Anything goes. Anything goes. Okay, wrong year. But so if a movie has been on the show before, it's fair game for today's 4:30 movie.
Yeah, we can't for Comic-Con. We can't go with one hand tied behind our back. We got to come full throttle.
And it's worth noting that a lot of these movies, have been picked on the show before, have been selected. So we really didn't want to limit ourselves by saying that they were, off limits. So, Steve, with that said, tell us what we're going to be watching on Monday.
And I also want to point out that none of us knows what anyone else is picking.
Right.
Ahead of time. There's no advanced planning. So,
sometimes
if I pick a movie,
we ourselves don't know what we're picking. Until the moment.
Sometimes I might pick a movie that Mark was going to pick, and Mark will have to think of a new pick by the time it gets to Thursday. So,
and no times people will pick a movie that I'm going to pick.
Never been a problem. Steve and Darren, yes, you never.
All right, so for Monday, my choice is a movie that for listeners of the podcast, sometime last year I told a story about my epic journey. My 7-mile walk through the Northern Virginia summer heat to see The Empire Strikes Back at a movie theater. That I just really wanted to see Empire again, and so me and my friends spent several hours walking to this theater. My pick I saw the following summer at the same theater. Didn't have to walk to it. I got my mom and dad to drive.
And no dead deer.
No dead deer for this one.
Oh, okay.
So my pick is a big adventure, a rollicking adventure story about the power of God that stars Pat Roach. And of course, I'm talking about Clash of the Titans.
Provide him with suitable weapons of divine temper. A helmet, a shield, a sword.
Find and fulfill your destiny.
The myth. The magic, the mystery, the majesty.
Destroy Argos let loose the last of the Titans.
Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer presents Clash of the Titans. The good, the evil, the danger, the daring.
How may a mortal man face and defeat the Kraken?
Clash of the Titans. The combat, the courage, the splendor, the spectacle. Clash of the Titans. Starring Harry Hamlin as Perseus, Judy Bowker as Andromeda, Burgess Meredith, Maggie Smith, Ursula Andress, Claire Bloom, Sean Phillips, Flora Robeson, and Laurence Olivier as Zeus. Before history, beyond imagination. Clash of the Titans.
An epic mythological tale of Perseus and his efforts to save Andromeda and the people of her city from the power of a wrathful god and the wrath of the Kraken. And this was and when we talk about the 80s being a transitionary period, I think this is a great example because this is a film that was made. Clearly, the studios wanted to capture some of that mythological magic that made movies like Star Wars and Superman big hits at the box office. So,
hence the robot owl.
We got a robot owl that they claim. Ray Harryhausen swears that he invented this before Star Wars came out. I am skeptical of that claim, but this is a movie that. Apparently, they initially Orion Pictures wanted Arnold Schwarzenegger to star in it, but they decided the producer decided there was too much dialogue for the part of Perseus for 1981 Arnold Schwarzenegger to handle. So this is a movie that transitionary. So you've got a kind of an old school British director who is a camera operator in a lot of classic epic British films, and this was probably his biggest production as a director. And it was written by Beverly Cross, who wrote Jason and the Argonauts and Cindad and the Eye of the Tiger for Ray Harryhausen. So someone who's comfortable in this.
Not to be confused with Rocky and the Eye of the Tiger.
So someone who's comfortable in this mythological thing. And of course, produced by the great Ray Harryhausen, who is one of the icons of visual effects, spectacle cinema. With his great stop motion technique. And this film probably represents the culmination of all of his talents and skills in bringing all of these fantastical creatures to the screen, and represented the last film that he produced before he retired. It was released on June 12th, the same day as Raiders of the Lost Ark. It actually performed pretty well. It was the number 2 movie that weekend, and it was the number 11 grossing movie for the year. And I'd say it was a movie that was a lot of fun. I saw it at least twice in the theaters, maybe even 3 or 4 times, because I was at an age when I was hungry for these kinds of epic visual effects, adventure tales. And, it's goofy, it's corny, but, it's great. It's got a great cast, young Harry Hamlin. It stars Laurence Olivier, talking about, a transitionary period. You've got these great British actors like, Laurence Olivier, Maggie Smith, and Claire Bloom, and Burgess Meredith cast as so that there would be another American actor in it.
Get in there and get him, Perseus.
You know who puts butts in seats? Burgess
Meredith.
And Meredith.
It's so funny because, you talk about how they're trying to very clearly capitalize on the success of Star Wars, but it's like they had that kind of one sheet that was like Towering Inferno and Poseidon Adventure, showcasing all these great Hollywood stars.
Yeah.
But it's like no one that a 12-year-old could care about. Laurence Olivier, Ursula Andress, Claire Bloom. And it was like, what? So it got a magic owl? What?
The parents will go for the cast. The kids will go for the owl.
I was deep into my Dungeons and Dragons phase at this point also, so this is perfect. There's all these monsters in it, and swords and shields, and people turning invisible, and all that kind of stuff.
I'm amazed for a movie that had, at least in Brooklyn, that had no one saw and no one was talking about, and that was super lethargically paced and boring, that Release the Kraken has become this huge pop culture staple that everyone knows, because I never felt that Clash of the Titans in any way entered the zeitgeist. You seem to have a much bigger, it was successful and people loved it. And that was not my memory of the original Clash of the Titans.
Well, I was a big Greek mythology nerd and just mythology nerd in general, right? Like the way my kid can talk about freaking dinosaurs, I can talk about mythology, right? So I was super excited. I read the novelization. I didn't get to see it in the theater. Like I saw it on video. But I was very excited. I realized, however, that the owl was non-canonical. There was never a mechanical owl in the original myths, which I was happy to tell you. Tender age.
Aeschylus never wrote about the mechanical owl.
That's right. It's like Bobonicus.
It also had a great score by Lawrence Rosenthal.
Mm-hmm. Yes, much better than his score
Star
for
Trek
The Voyage Home.
You're thinking of Leonard Rosenman.
Yes, you're right. You're
damn
right.
it.
Yeah. No. Thanks for keeping us honest.
Yeah, well, we knew that.
Yeah. Thank goodness that wasn't last week.
Pete Pot Whistle.
But yeah, I totally, I was a huge fan of Greek mythology as well, so I couldn't wait to go see it. I ran to go see it at the Brook Theater in Brooklyn. I was so excited. And boy, I hated that movie. But I'm so surprised that you're a pick, because just knowing what's potentially coming up and what that year was like, I'm fascinated by the fact that you picked Clash of the Titans.
The battle with Medusa alone is worth the visit.
Yeah, that's a great scene. It's a great scene.
It's got great sound design. It's tense. Yeah, it's just a fun movie. And it had nudity in it. A kind of a
puppet nudity.
Oh no!
Oh yeah, that one shot. Never mind.
There were a couple of shots in there.
No Logan's Run.
No, that's for sure.
But
for a PG movie, in the PG summer movie or targeted at kids, it was kind of surprising.
Like I said, it's no Logan's Run. That was PG, 1976.
Mm-hmm. And now,
kids like nudity. But I have to say, no, I'm fascinated. I'm really fascinated that it was Steve's pick.
Well, I'll tell you, looking at this list of picks, this is a period, I was looking for a movie that I saw in theaters in 1981. And that was a period when, like I said, I had to walk to a movie theater. So I didn't have easy access to movies at that time. So a lot of the movies that, that ended up being huge movies, I didn't see until years later on VHS. Yeah. So I was picking something that I had a personal relationship with, and a movie that I think would be very much at home on the 4:30 movie on television. This is exactly the kind of movie.
Oh, totally. And you know what really made me appreciate this movie a lot more than I ever did? The remake. When I saw the remake, which was all CGI nonsense, I was like, wow, that original was really good.
But the thing is, the problem with the remake is not the CGI, even though it's not very good. The problem is that it doesn't have the story intact. It doesn't have an interesting story that compels you along. And the more special effects they throw at it, it would have been just as bad with conventional visual effects.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a great pick to start us off. Clash of the Titans on Monday, the last of the great Ray Harryhausen movies. And it goes with our thesis that it was sort of the last, this was the end of an era. 81 was closing the book on a certain era of filmmaking. And this goes back to, the 50s and, it goes back even before that with Willis O'Brien. In the 80s, you sort of see, the rise of ILM with Poltergeist and Star Trek II. And I don't mean like the Star Wars ILM, like ILM for hire, doing, he's like Spencer for Hire Island, doing all these other movies. And then through the 80s, stop motion would usually be like the creature at the end of Howard the Duck, or the creature at the end of Witches of Eastwick. That was what stop motion was for. But Clash of the Titans was that kind of classical stop motion, which was so wonderful. Lost Ark.
You did have Tauntauns and AT-AT Walkers the year before in Empire Strikes Back.
Absolutely. And it was the evolution. And I think part of what made Clash of the Titans feel like a throwback and a little primitive, because Phil Tippett and everyone on Empire had done it so brilliantly with the Tauntauns and with the particularly with the Walker sequence, which is one of the great, most virtuoso stop motion sequences, since Kong, right? And Clash of the Titans isn't on that level.
Yeah. And I also wanted to add Ray Harryhausen was a kind of a regular fixture at Comic-Con. I used to see him there quite often at the table.
This.
Yeah. And to this day, I still regret never going and buying something for him to sign. All these years, I would walk by his table like, oh my God, there's Ray Harryhausen. Like, why did I buy something from him?
For all you kids who are nervous about, you see somebody you respect and you're like, I'm not going to go up and bother them. Don't make that mistake. Go up, be polite, be quick about it. But they, if you can just be nice and let them know you're a fan and say your piece quickly, they will appreciate it. Okay.
And especially if you buy something.
Yes. Yeah, that too.
or give them a drink.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sure the people in Artist Alley will be very happy if you're not buying things with Bitcoin. They'll be like, oh wow, cash, I'll take it. Darren Dochterman, Tuesday. Well, in 1981, it was very helpful to have friends in high places. And of course, after 1977, there was pretty much no higher place than that of George Lucas. And one of the benefits of being an FOG, a friend of George, is that you got the opportunity to make your own movie. And two of those friends were Matthew Robbins and Hal Barwood. And they had a film that was pretty spectacular and pretty expensive and pretty unseen before. And it was called Dragon Slayer. I knew you were going to...
I have been witness to something of consequence to you.
To me?
There's a great task needing to be done.
No doubt you've heard of our trouble at home.
A dragon, fire and stench. It is evil. Pure and simple.
You want me to do battle with that?
Behold, for I am chosen, I shall die that many may live.
Twice each year, the king selects a new victim. Chosen by lot, girls, virgins.
Your king's made a pact with a monster.
But your children were dying.
Only a few. Does that sound cruel?
Blacksmith, have you ever forged a weapon?
An edge like no other on this earth.
Dragon Slayer, coming from Paramount Pictures.
And it is absolutely evocative. It is fascinating. There is probably, the argument is that the movie may not be great, but the dragon is. The dragon is the most effective dragon I think ever put on in visual media, and that's including the modern, CG dragons of today. There is nothing that feels like it has more weight or realism or the feeling that it was shot on the set and it was running around. it's unbelievable. Some of those shots inside the caverns where it lives are so amazingly done that it is, frankly, unsurpassed even today. So the thing is, it's so interesting to watch this world, and it's so well crafted in terms of a realistic fairy tale that somehow, some of the characters are a little muddled and are not completely believable, but it's still absolutely magical. Sir Ralph Richardson plays an old wizard who is maybe not at the peak of his powers at this point in his life, but he has a promising apprentice, and the local town
young apprentice.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because the actor that played Palpatine is in this film as the sort of spiritual leader of this town who is being besieged by a giant dragon. Vermithrax Pejorative is his name.
Which is the best dragon name of all time.
It's an amazing, just to think that they would name a dragon in Latin is great.
Do you have any dragons named Vermithrax and Dragon's Blood on Netflix?
We do not have any dragons named Vermithrax Pejorative on Dragon's Blood, but I can tell you that the design of that dragon has really just, again, echoed through dragon designs for all time. Like, no matter how successful or not Dragon Slayer was in 1981, that was, and Darren is totally right, that is such a successful design, such a successful effect, that it is practically like, the design for, dragons in film. Everything kind of traces its roots back to that. It's truly beautiful and just an amazing effect, just an amazingly beautiful rendering of a dragon.
And I will say, when we were working on the names for the dragons, I did go to my Greek and Latin roots and was looking at Greek and Latin roots to help name those dragons.
That's right. In honor of Vermithrax Pejorative.
The one of the things that I find so fascinating about it is that the movie itself is sort of a riff on the Seven Samurai and the Magnificent Seven. Is that this small town asks the help of this magician and his coterie to rid the town of this horrible dragon, and they put the trust in this magician, who at some point meets with a less than happy end. And so it becomes the responsibility of the apprentice to follow through on the promise that the wizard made. And
it's a metaphor for being an assistant in Hollywood.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's really well done. Peter McNichol, who plays I believe the character is Galen. I don't remember. Maybe it is. He does really well. So well, in fact, that I thought he was British, and he's not. And Caitlin Clark plays this sort of boy who later becomes not a boy. And it's all due to the fact that only young virginal girls are picked for the lottery to be sacrificed to the dragon to keep it passive for another year. So it's blended with mythology and sort of a half realistic historical perspective. It's really fascinating to see this story created as if it were a real thing, and it's really fascinating to watch, and it's a lot of fun. The score is
Alex North.
It's Alex North, and I've never been a big fan of Alex North, and this is not a score that would change that opinion of mine. But it's certainly fascinating, and the film itself is a very lovely experience to see in a theater. I saw it like 3 times in a theater, and enjoyed the heck out of it. And some really scary spots and really exciting spots, and just a fun movie to watch.
And great, sorry, go ahead, Ash.
I really still remember that sequence when the dragon is coming to take his tribute, and the woman is chained up on that thing, and she's struggling to get out of those manacles, that she's pulling so hard that her wrists are bleeding, and the blood. Like, that just horrified me. That thought, like, oh my God, she's like an animal, like practically chewing their leg off to get away from this thing.
And of course, the stop motion is beautiful. ILM does some remarkable work with, that last 15, 20 minutes is really stunning.
Well, the technology that they developed for this film was sort of beyond stop motion. They called it go motion. And the dragon was on a rig that would do the movements of stop motion, but while the camera's iris was open, so you would get a little motion blur in the direction of the movement, so it looked completely real. And this was a big breakthrough for the technology of stop motion that wasn't on Clash of the Titans.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting pick. I know we had picked it, I believe, before for maybe Sword and Sorcery Week,
something like that.
Yeah, but I know you're a huge fan of that movie. I'm not surprised that you picked it again, and it's a movie that a lot of our listeners may not be as familiar with, because for a long time it was out of print, it wasn't available easily, and it's worth checking out on the 4:30 movie on Tuesday.
And I'll remind you, Mark, it was you who picked Clash of the Titans on Sword and Sorcery Week.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
Are you sure?
I'm positive.
Is Steve Melching. Of course he's sure.
On Sword and Sorcery Week, I picked. No, you know what? I think that was when we didn't do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because we had revolving days, and then we locked into Monday, Tuesday. Then we locked into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I must have been a different day, because I did not pick that.
You must have been a different person.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was our fourth episode.
So yeah, we would still have not have locked in yet.
Yeah, so we I don't think, because every week people would have a different day. That was before you became Mr. Monday, and Ashley became Mr. Wednesday. And speaking of Mr. Wednesday, yeah, that. So Ash, what cinematic genius have you for us today? I don't suspect Condor Man is going to make an appearance.
You know what's funny about that? You're right. Although Condor Man gets filed under the list of movies that I didn't see until I saw them on video, but I read the novelization because I was desperate to go to the movies, but never really had the opportunity except for on very special occasions. So when I went to the bookstore, I would always buy the movie tie-in novels and read them. That was as close as I got sometimes.
And now, you're developing the TV series for Disney Plus now.
Dude, I would you know what? Disney Plus, call me. You got my number. I'll do Condor Man for free.
It's the Wrath of Condor Man.
The Wrath of Condor Man, exactly. So when I sat down to begin this panel, I had one idea of what I wanted to do. And then I got really inspired by Daren's pick, by Steve's pick, because what I realized is the theme that's really emerging for this week is not just 1981. It's that we were boys of a certain age, and we were affected by these films in a different way at that time than perhaps if we kind of do a critical look back. If we were doing the AFI's list of the top 5 movies of 1981, I think we would be programming a different week than what we're programming. And this is really about the experience of being who we were at the time. Okay, so let me tell you about a movie I definitely saw it for the first time on video. And the first time I saw it on video, I could barely see it because the signal was all wonky. Now, I know that this is a movie we've picked before, but the signal was all wonky because it was on HBO. But I was highly motivated to watch it because it was like nothing I had ever seen. It had amazing music, and it was animated, and people were getting slaughtered right and left, and there was chicks, and I just didn't know what to make of it. And I am talking, of course, about in many ways for people in the animation industry, people who work in the area of adult animation. It's the holy grail, man. It's the thing that we all talk about. It's the thing that we all want to do for all of its warts, and it has some. 1981's Heavy Metal.
Columbia Pictures presents Heavy Metal. A trip beyond the future to a universe you've never seen before. A universe of mystery. A universe of passionate fantasies. A universe of terrifying evil. A universe of magic. Heavy Metal. Beyond science fiction.
Oh, I thought you were going to say The Fox and the Hound.
I was going to say The Fox and the Hound. Right? I'm a fox. I'm a hound dog. This is the saddest goddamn movie you're ever going to see. You're going to be freaking traumatized by the... Holy shit, that movie. Can we not talk about The Fox and the Hound? Because I did see that in the theater, and I'm still recovering from it. Heavy Metal is an anthology. It's an anthology of stories that were taken from Heavy Metal magazine. And here's what makes it special. Not only was it really... Look, there had been adult animation before. Certainly. Guys like, Ralph Bakshi were out there, fighting the good fight and I guess smoking the good stuff, like trying to make things that mom and dad would not want, young Ashman to go out and see. Okay. This was already happening. So it wasn't new under the sun in that way. But where Heavy Metal really succeeded was it took these great little science fiction and fantasy stories and horror stories that had been published in Heavy Metal magazine, and it adapted them to animation. It gave them a wraparound story that was super cool, and then it went to that next level, and it took, heavy metal music, right? Which in 1981, heavy metal was the ultimate in transgression, right? And we're not talking like, this wasn't the era of Poison, right? This wasn't like, the era of, of hair bands. This was freaking Blue Oyster Cult, man. This is like when heavy metal was heavy. And they were fearless in terms of how they married that music to what was happening on screen. There is, I think I would be willing to guess that one of the most popular sequences in the film follows the crew of a B-17 on a bombing mission, the worst night of their lives, as they're getting shot up and there are zombies. And Don Felder's Taking a Ride is playing in the background, and it is just awesome. What makes all of that adaptation unique is that there's an actual effort to adapt the visual style of the artists who had originally created the material for Heavy Metal magazine. So the segment about Den by Richard Corben looks very different from the section that follows Bernie Wrightson's Captain Stern, right? Or follows like, I think the closest thing that Heavy Metal has to a franchisable character, Tarna the Terrakian, right? Mm-hmm. All of those things, just they kind of work together in this amazing, fun little stew that like we still feel the effects of. I mean, my God. Netflix just released the second volume of Love, Death, and Robots, which is kind of like if you wanted to do heavy metal, but you didn't want to pay the licensing fee. Like that's what we're talking about. That's like, and it's funny because that's another theme I think that emerges for this week. That heavy metal lives on in the culture in this very strange way, in the same way that Vermithrax Pejorative lives on in the culture in a way that you would not expect. In the same way that Release the Kraken lives on in the culture in a way that you would not expect. That 1981, these movies, Heavy Metal, Clash of the Titans, Dragon Slayer, like are kind of these stealth elements of pop culture, which are just awesome. They're indelible. And on top of that, Heavy Metal kicks ass. I could go on about it for days and days. I won't. I'll just say that that I love it and I am proud to program it for Wednesday, 1981.
Cool.
I don't love it, but I respect it tremendously. And in fact, we did a show a little while ago called Music to My Ears Week, where we did great movie scores at Elevator Movie. And the irony is, to me, it's not the heavy metal that's great in this movie. It's Elmer Bernstein's amazing score. And in fact, I wish we'd picked that for Friday instead of Stripes, but because it's such a great score. But I remember I had a Tarna. I had the one sheet for heavy metal in my room as a kid. It was that, Conan, a Psycho 2, and Revenge of the Jedi. But I remember that one sheet very well. And, it's like I was fascinated by heavy metal, but I didn't love heavy metal. Mm-hmm. But it's a great pick, and it's so unique. Movies like that aren't getting released now. You're doing stuff like that for streaming TV. But like you said, that was that was the North Star of adult. And even though Ralph Bakshi had been doing stuff throughout the 70s, I mean, the thing that people I think of our generation remember, heavy metal was more than Fritz the Cat, more than Fire and Ice. It's just
Deathstalker. I would definitely tell you that that I am. The thing that I'm chasing on my show is always heavy metal. Like, it would never occur to me to tell you, and like Fire and Ice. Like, I mean, Fire and Ice happened, sure, but it's just not the same.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. There were always rumors of a sequel. They did do one many years later, but
that was not good.
But I mean, this was a big release from Sony, from Columbia Pictures at the time. I mean, I remember at the conventions, they were promoting the hell out of it. They were promoting it like it was Star Wars. And it's a great pick for Wednesday. It's funny because, I thought you were going to pick something like Evil Dead or The Howling.
Close. So very close.
I'm very surprised.
10-year-old me wouldn't have watched them.
Yeah. Or Endless Love. But
you're right.
But I'm really, I think that's a great pick, guys. Steve, you've worked in animation a lot in your career. What do you think of heavy metal?
Heavy metal is a movie that I didn't see until years later, because I had to pick and choose my movies very carefully in 1981, and I wasn't into the rock and roll music. I wasn't into the heavy metal scene. That wasn't my bag, man. So I saw the poster, and I like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. And I remember seeing that poster all over the place. But there was something about it that felt a little scary to me, and that's probably what appealed to Ashley about it. Where Ashley was drawn to it, I was a little afraid of heavy metal. So it felt kind of dirty and violent and grown up and like I don't know, I was wary of it for many years. So it wasn't until probably at least 10 years later before I finally saw it. And I think it's great. I really enjoy it now. It's really interesting, all the reasons that Ashley gave, and I wish that I did give it a chance back then. But
I hadn't seen it until HBO either, because it was an R-rated movie, and it was not one that I was going to get parents to take me to. So, like you, I saw it on HBO where it played every 12 seconds, so, but that's, we got to do our HBO week, movies that played when we were kids on HBO every three, with Risky Business and Bachelor Party and all that stuff. Okay. So, that's Wednesday. Great pick, which brings us to Thursday. And, boy, I'm in an unenviable position, because the film that I was sure Steve was going to pick and didn't, and then Darren I was sure was going to pick and didn't, has not been picked yet.
Right.
Notice he didn't mention me.
No, I didn't think you were going to pick it. And I'm going to live on the edge and hope that we can find a home for it on Friday, because I don't want to pick it.
I think it's going to be on Friday. I know,
because I got a lot of problems here, because I'm looking at, first of all, there's a Bond movie that year. That's an easy one for me to dismiss, because I'm not a huge Fear Eyes Only fan. Right. A lot of people felt that it was put the franchise back on solid footing. Frankly, I find Moonraker far more entertaining, as ridiculous as it is. I'm not a big Fear Eyes Only fan, although it has a couple of great scenes, like when Bond and Topol are facing off, and he thinks Topol's the villain, and then Topol hands him back his gun and says, "By tomorrow we'll be fast friends." And then he points the gun at Topol and says, "We'll see." Topol's wondering, did I do the right thing giving the Walther back to Bond? So there's good stuff but it's a little goofy. It's the first of the John Glenn's movies. It's not particularly well directed.
Is that the one with the parachute gag?
No, that's Spy Love Me.
Spy Love Me.
No, this starts with the faux Blofeld. I'll buy you a delicatessen, Mr. Bond. Just for that, I can't pick it. I'll buy you a delicatessen in stainless steel.
Mr. Bond!
Keep your hair on. Okay, so we're not going to... Look, there's a movie I've picked before for one of our Halloween weeks. Of course, that was American Werewolf in London, John Landis's horror comedy classic. I'm not going to pick that. There's Albert Brooks's answer to Annie Hall, Modern Romance. Wonderful, but, we only got 5 slots, and I ain't picking Modern Romance. It's tough. I mean, it's really tough. I mean, there are movies I picked before. Guilty Pleasure Week, I picked Looker. I'd be out of my mind to pick it today, Then you have to listen to me, sing that song again by Cindad. She's a looker. And so we don't want to do that. We want to spare you that. So now is where it gets tough. Now, if I was going to be like you guys and try and go against the grain, I'd just say, throw caution to the wind and say, okay, fine. I'm going to pick Legend of the Lone Ranger. Phil Fraker directed it, the great DP. But I can't because it's terrible. And I'm never picking a movie with Clinton Spilsbury as its lead. I'm sorry.
Luckily, you only have one choice there.
Great John Barry score. Maybe I should have picked it for Music to My Ears week, right? Okay. So here's the thing. I'm down. Michael Caine week, we didn't pick The Hand for a reason. Guy going like this, cartoonist, go around. Oh, my hand! It's like, come on. Really?
That was the first movie that we had a bootleg of when we got our first VHS machine in 1982. So for some reason, we bought it used from this guy who had it taped The Hand off of cable TV. And that scene was horrifying to me. It was ridiculous, but just him flailing around my hand in the blood, and oh my God.
I can relate. I didn't have a bootleg. It was one of the first things I rented after Sharky's Machine on Warner Home Video in that green case. And I watched it, and it was awful. But that scene haunted me. It amused me to no end and haunted me at the same time. Who would have thought that Oliver Stone would eventually become an Oscar Award winning filmmaker, one of our most talented directors? Not me. Not after seeing The Hand. He talks about, I have so much respect for him because I read his book, Losing the Light, his memoir, which he wrote. It came out earlier this year, or the end of last year. And he talks about The Hand at length. And I had so much respect for him. Because, it's easy to talk about Platoon and Wall Street, and all these great movies he made. But he actually gets into The Hand, and he spares himself no pain. And I gave him a lot of credit for that. Okay. So now we're to my picks. It's tough because I'm down to 2 picks. One, I absolutely adore, which I only later saw on home video. I didn't see in a theater. So, and it was written and directed by one of my favorite writers. It was a thinly veiled remake of Double Indemnity, but he denies it. So I'm going to give it to the other film that's more original because Body Heat. It was, let's face it, it was Double Indemnity. It's great. William Hurt and Kathleen Turner are amazing. It's a brilliant thriller. It's beautifully directed, a gorgeous John Barry score. But you know what? Hey, we're at Comic-Con. So I'm going to go with the film I did pick for Sword and Sorcery Week. And that is John Boorman's brilliant movie, Dun, 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 Dun. I'm tempting to do Carl Orff there, but I can't do it. Excalibur.
Wayne's World thing.
One land, one king. One pick. Excalibur.
A wizard's ancient spell.
Into the eyes of the dragon and the despair.
And the lust of a lord.
I must have her. One night with her.
Give birth to an empire.
Behold the sword of power, Excalibur.
Pictures presents John Boorman's Excalibur.
Knights of the Round Table, we shall always come together in a circle to hear and tell of deeds good and brave. And I will marry.
Don't you know me, Merlin? Because I'm a creature like you.
Their magic is Merlin.
Are you just a dream to some?
A nightmare to others.
Their king is Arthur.
You are my husband.
I must be king first.
Their power is Excalibur.
I swear eternal faith to Arthur, king.
Sir Lancelot, you will be my champion.
Which is that? Greatest quality of knighthood.
True.
We're hides evil then.
Where you never expected.
I protest my innocence.
Were I not king, I would make you pay with your life.
A world of wizards, kings, warriors, queens, swords, sorcery, and desire. Forged of splendor and magic, where future meets past, flesh meets steel, and the only fear is the pain of love. Excalibur, sword of power, sword of kings.
We have to evoke the charm of making.
Excalibur was a loose adaptation of La Morte d'Arthur. It is a 3-hour, a serious R-rated Arthurian legend. It's the first R-rated movie I ever saw in a theater. It is great. It is great, and the cast is a little weird, but if you look quickly, you'll see Patrick Stewart with hair. You'll see Liam Neeson. A lot of people in very early roles, but Nicole Williamson.
If you're not blinded by the shiniest armor ever committed to film.
Yeah. But Nicole Williamson steals the movie as Merlin. He is so good and has so many great lines. And ride the dragon's breath, and you'll take on the visage of the Duke. It's so good, and it's so grounded and real. It just feels it was in a way it's a precursor to Game of Thrones. I actually went to HBO Max, and I was talking to one of the development execs. I said, is there something you want to do? I said, yeah, I want to do Excalibur as a TV series. They said, no, we're doing like 9,000 versions of Game of Thrones. We're not interested in doing Excalibur. I said, but I want to do Excalibur. But I love Excalibur. I think it's great. It has an amazing one sheet.
Oh yeah.
Which I had in my office for many years. It's
not to be confused with the planet Excalibur.
No, because that is
the sign of
silicon based.
Yes.
This is not silicon based, and Abraham Lincoln is not in Excalibur, whereas he was on Excalibur. But look, if you haven't seen it, this is back when they made, event movies adult. They were for character development. They're dark. It's twisted. John Boorman shoots the movie brilliantly. The biggest problem is he casts like half his family in pivotal roles.
At times that got creepy.
Yeah, and then he does it again in the Emerald Forest. Like his son plays Mordred, and then like the wife who's raped is like his wife or something. And, it's just weird. It's weird. It's creepy. But
no one in the
I didn't know that as a kid.
No one in the film is more adult than Helen Mirren.
That is true.
She's great as Morgana. She's so great.
She and Nicole Williamson apparently
you're the mother
each other.
and the father now, Merlin. Now that she doesn't say that, but the young Morgana says it's great. Oh my God, it's so great. It's just so like. It's the great Sword in the Stone. There's been so many adaptations of the Sword in the Stone and Excalibur, but none of them are better than Excalibur. I just love this movie. I've always loved this movie. I watched it again recently, and I hadn't watched it in a long time. And I was like, oh my God, this movie is really as good as I remember it. So as much as I love Body Heat, and I know it's not going to be Friday's pick because we have other family business to attend to, I had to go with Excalibur over Body Heat. It's just more ambitious. Like Body Heat is brilliant, and it's awesome, and I love it. But And I picked it for some week. I don't know which one, but it has to be Excalibur.
Yeah, it almost doesn't matter that Body Heat came out in 1981. It kind of matters that Excalibur came out in 1981, especially given the way this week is going. One of my favorite things about Excalibur is just hearing all of the batshit insane stories about how unsafe and crazy it was to make. Like the fact that Nicole Williamson's like crazy beanie that he wears saved his life one day because a light fell on it.
Yeah.
Or that they put all these guys, all these actors, untrained, into this armor that was heavy with these swords that were heavy and just had them start whacking at each other. And they couldn't hear anything or see anything. They were half murdering each other while John Boorman was like shooting God knows what. I mean, the OSHA violations alone would make one hell of a documentary. Like,
and it didn't have a big budget. It didn't have a big budget, but it didn't feel small. It felt epic, even with a very a small budget.
That's right.
Yeah.
Terrific acting. Just totally compelling and beautiful.
It's a great movie. I'm very happy. I'm very content with my pick for Thursday, which brings us to Friday.
There's an obvious
and before we get to the obvious choice. There are a couple of films that we got
a 5-minute warning there.
We've picked it before. We picked Outland, which Peter Hyams' underrated space western, worth a look. Another one from the dawn of the home video era, and HBO, which I'm sure we've seen a million times. Sean Connery's great in it. It's a really fun sci-fi take on High Noon. Halloween 2, Rick Rosenthal's continuation of Halloween, which is not nearly as embarrassing as it could have been, unlike Mommy Dearest, which was.
Stripes, our pick from last week for Friday.
Stripes.
Albert Finney and Wolfen.
Yeah. Looker.
An early James. Well, I mentioned Looker, yeah.
Oh, that's
I love
right.
Looker.
Yeah.
It's a great movie. It could easily been my pick. Michael Crichton's overlooked masterpiece.
Arguably the United States' introduction to Mad Max, The Road Warrior.
Yep.
Well, technically that came out in the U.S. in 82. It came out in Australia in 81, but in the U.S. it came out in 82. I consider that an 82 movie.
Yeah, that was my original pick, and then I dug a little deeper. Like, technically it came out in 81, but
I consider that part of the greatest geek year ever, 1982. Escape from New York, I was another thing I thought you might have gone with.
That was close to being my pick, but at that age,
well, another one that I thought Steve would pick, Time Bandits.
Yeah, I totally thought Time Bandits was where Steve was going.
That was a very, very strong contender for me, and I love Time Bandits. I think it's a much better movie than Clash of the Titans. And I did see it in the theaters that year. So maybe I made a mistake not choosing Time Bandits, but I'll give it some love here. It's a great movie if you haven't seen it.
And I thought Ashley's pick was going to be Mommy Dearest, honest.
Just for the hell of it. You know what? Maybe. Actually, I think Mark kind of mentioned it. I mean, The Evil Dead would have been a pretty good Ashley pick for Wednesday, because it's one of my favorite movies. It's one of the movies that I in strange ways most admire. But I just, at the age of 10, are you kidding? No, never. I would have run screaming just from the title.
Darren, you weren't going to pick Richard Marquand's greatest film, Eye of the Needle?
No, I wasn't. It went across my transom, but no.
I'm sorry.
But there are a couple of other really good movies that year. I mean, Arthur.
Absolutely.
Certainly David Cronenberg's Scanners.
Yeah.
Victory, we're all a fan of.
Michael Mann's
Thief is a terrific movie.
Could have been a pick for a couple of different weeks, for sure.
Blowout.
Chariots of Fire.
That was the movie about the haircut.
Yeah. I love Blowout. I love Blowout. It's my favorite De Palma movie. And any other year, it probably would have made the cut. Not 1981, I don't think. I would say that, in the shadow of Star Wars, you had all these knockoffs, everything from what some would say Battlestar Galactica, A Message from Space, to Starship Invasions. Then when Alien came out, you started to have all these Alien knockoffs. And one of the most famous is Roger Corman's Galaxy of Terror with Erin Moran. And of course, part of that is because Gale Anne Hurd and James Cameron sort of got their start working on that movie for Roger Corman. So it's unique in that, and it also is just this god awful alien ripoff.
Yeah.
Which the next year they would do again with Forbidden World, which was almost as bad, with June Chadwick.
Well, it's so fascinating that none of us mentioned the Academy Award winner that year for Best Picture, Chariots of Fire.
That's true. Although I have to say, I was lucky enough to work with Ben Cross, who is an absolutely wonderful man who passed away last year. And, Chariots of Fire, Hugh Hudson's movie. It's a terrific movie. Not something I would put in my top given the movies that we're talking about. But, I do want to say, Ben Cross was just a terrific guy.
I did see Chariots of Fire in the theater because it was a Best Picture nominee that year. Somehow, I don't know how, I ended up seeing Chariots of Fire when I'm 13 years old. And I was surprised I stayed awake during it, but that was the last time I saw that movie. I've been meaning to watch it again, but haven't seen it in 40 years.
I stayed awake during Legend of the Lone Ranger because they would sing the plot every once in a while. I think it was Merle Haggard or somebody. So they would, he was a man with the mask, who was, and it was just would sum up what was happening in the movie.
Too much about this movie, Mark.
Oh, I do. I know a lot. My dad and I went because we were huge Lone Ranger fans from the TV show and the radio show. And we were so excited. And then we saw it. And I remember we came out and we both what the was that? I mean, it was like Jason Robards as Ulysses Grant.
But I didn't say fudge.
Speaking of Bob Clark, Christmas Story.
Yes.
I want to give an honorable mention to Porky's, which I think is one of the great misunderstood movies of all time in terms of how people think of that movie versus what it is. Yes, it's this insane sex comedy. There's nudity everywhere. There's a penis, and there's a penis identification scene where the phys ed teacher's a mole and recognizes it. Cool, right? There's all kinds of sex and fucking and all this other stuff. But what really makes that movie legitimately interesting is that it really is very honestly about these boys, these in high school growing up in 1954, dealing with, parental physical abuse, dealing with racism and bigotry, about their friendship, all of these things. It's the themes of that movie and the emotions of that movie are more honest and more deeply felt than I think certainly than the marketing campaign would indicate. And again, it's from Bob Clark, director of Black Christmas and A Christmas Story, two of the best Christmas movies of all time.
Yeah. No, Porky's was a huge film at the time. It was super. People can't understand, and that set off that huge teensploitation boom of the 80s because there were so many. Because it was horror movies, they could be made really cheap, and they all did really well. So you had a ton of these Porky's knockoffs all through the 80s. And Porky's was the thing that really set it off, set off those films. I remember another film, 81. I don't think it's great. The Postman Always Rings Twice remake. Bob Rafelson directed it. The thing about that movie I remember is they were really, touting the big love scene, the sexy love scene between Jack Nicholson and Jessica Lange. But the only thing I remembered about that movie was, oh my God, Core was in it. John Kalikos was the guy in it. So I'm like, oh, hey, that's Baltar. So that was what was memorable about The Postman Always Rings Twice.
I got to give a shout out to a movie that I remember seeing on the video rental shelf, and I rented it on the basis of the cover art, which was so great. I'm talking about Tom Savini's Night Riders, which is the picture is this guy in black knight armor with a morning star sitting on a motorcycle. And I remember renting that movie, and it's just this crazy sort of Mad Max meets Excalibur kind of movie with guys fighting each other on motorcycles. It's nuts.
And we got a name check victory, if only because it's the only movie that ever starred Sylvester Stallone, Michael Caine, and Pele.
Yeah.
But it's much better than it sounds.
Yeah.
Also passes the HBO test. Probably not a day in 1981, 82 went by without Victory being on at least once.
It was like the Ted Lasso of 1981, only different.
And a smaller movie that I'd never really heard of until Ashley mentioned it in our writer's room a couple of years ago, Southern Comfort.
Walter Hill,
Interesting little violent little movie.
And then Lily Tomlin was in The Incredible Shrinking Woman, which is not a particularly great movie. Sort of a comedic version. But that was back when like The Incredible Shrinking Man aired on the 4:30 movie all the time, and everyone knew that movie. Now nobody knows that movie. It's sort of interesting. And then of course Warren Beatty's Reds was a huge movie that he'd been wanting to make for a long time. That came out that year. But I think we all know. Oh, and Nighthawks. Also, Sylvester Stallone had done a certain kind of movie. This was a very different kind of movie for him. And Rutger Hauer is great at it. And of course, it's also a small role for Persis Khambatta with hair.
And a movie that I've heard for many years and is referenced all the time, and I finally watched during the pandemic, My Dinner with Andre.
Yeah, which is a great movie. Yeah. Great little movie. And Siskel and Ebert loved that movie. I think that was their favorite movie of the year that year.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful, wonderful film. But I think we all know.
There's one film that we have not mentioned.
Arthur.
Under the Rainbow.
Under the Rainbow.
With Carrie Fisher.
So.
Yep. Tarzan the Ape Man.
Oh my God! Remember when that came out? I worked at a video store in that era, and boy, so many people would want that film because Bo Derek was huge after 10. But there was like all these people would want to rent this awful Richard Harris and Bo Derek, and it was the first time Jane was the star of a Tarzan movie, and it's awful. It's unwatchable. Yeah. But boy, that was popular. That was very popular on the video store circuit. I can tell you that. But yeah, Darren, you were saying there's one film other than Gallipoli that we haven't mentioned,
and it's listed incorrectly on IMDb.
Yeah. Yep.
Dark Knight of the Scarecrow.
Unfortunately, this trend that happened when the studio started renaming the first movie in this, I consider it a trilogy. It's under I, because Jehovah begins with an I. They call it Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, but we know better that it is only Raiders of the Lost Ark.
For nearly 3,000 years, man has searched for the lost Ark of the Covenant.
The Bible speaks of the Ark leveling mountains and laying waste to entire regions. Not something to be taken lightly. No one knows its secrets.
Jones, do you realize what the Ark is? It's a transmitter. It's a radio for speaking to God.
An army which carries the Ark before it is invincible.
The Ark, if it is there, Eternis, then it is something that man was not meant to disturb.
It is protected by forces beyond imagination. It is desired above all treasures on earth by those who are good, trust me, and those who are evil.
I'll tell you everything.
Yes, I know you will.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Let her go.
We have no time. If you still want the Ark, it has been loaded onto a truck for Cairo.
Raiders of the Lost Ark. A film from Steven Spielberg and George Lucas.
Released in June of 1981.
Yep.
And it's 40 years old now.
It's older than Indiana Jones.
And it just came out on 4K UHD from Paramount. What can you say about this movie other than the fact
it
one of the greats?
blindsided everybody.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No one was expecting this. Yeah, it was an incredible surprise. You saw a little bit of chat about it during the marketing for Empire Strikes Back. You saw the stories of George Lucas building his Skywalker Ranch in Newsweek magazine. And there was a little blurb about, and his next project is this thing, Raiders of a Lost Ark with Steven Spielberg. And that was it.
Yeah, apparently, we all talked about this. We thought it was, at least I'm speaking for myself, and we talked
Noah's
about
Ark.
I thought it was about Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
Because I knew the Sun Classics movie,
Right.
Search Historic Noah's Ark. And
it looked like a cowboy looking for Noah's Ark.
Yeah,
that's what I thought too.
Like,
Clearly, boys, we were wrong.
It was
a
wonderful thing to be completely surprised by it.
Completely blindsided.
Yeah.
Because you go in because it's Lucas and Spielberg, knowing nothing about, and John Williams. It's the big three,
and
right?
Han Solo.
And Han Solo. It's the big four. So you go in knowing that's all we knew. All we knew. And you knew no idea what this movie's about. And from the very beginning, where Spielberg's hiding the ball, and you just see the feet and the whip and no faces. And then all of a sudden, the guy goes for the gun to take out Indiana Jones, and he whips it out of his hand, and he turns around into the light, and we reveal his face. I mean, it's so great.
So great.
It is virtuoso filmmaking of the first class. It takes sort of a third-rate C-list genre, of the pulp serials of the 30s, and turns it into art.
Yep.
It is one of the great adventure movies of all time. It is brilliantly written. And talk about setups and payoffs with, snakes and the Hovitos and, just everything. Oh, it's so good. And it also reminds us that Nazis are bad.
That's right.
For those of you people who don't remember.
And it holds up to this day. I mean, I've told this story before, but taking Caden to see it a couple of years ago, right? When he's like 8 years old, we went to see it at the ArcLight. Oh God, the ArcLight. And he had never seen it before. And first of all, he loved it. And his reaction to the moment when, the guy comes out with swords and he's swinging him around and Indy just goes and shoots him. That kid jumped out of his chair, cheering and laughing and looking at me like, Dad, can you fucking believe what we just saw? And I went, this movie works. This movie works, man.
And
it shoots with all barrels full all the time, and it's so smart, it's so inventive, it's so witty and so creative with very little. This was Spielberg proving that he could make a film under time and under budget.
His 1941 had been hugely over budget, hugely over schedule, and a big failure.
Monstrosity, yeah.
And if Raiders hadn't worked, Spielberg may not have gone on to the career that he had.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This was his proving ground to prove not only to Hollywood, but to himself.
Jaws wasn't a fluke, and Close Encounters wasn't a fluke.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
And such sharply drawn characters. I mean, they're just terrific.
Yep.
Even the happy accidents, one of the most famous stories in movies. How Harrison Ford got a stomach bug. And so he shows up, and there was supposed to be this huge action scene where he fights the swordsman, and all he wanted to do was go back to his hotel and go to sleep. And he says, what if I just pull my gun and shoot him? And it's one of the great scenes in the history of movies.
Yeah.
And they were happy accidents. Amazing.
And just incredible stunt work, the likes of which, we rarely see. So many great set pieces.
Yeah.
And I love the recycling of the gag where Tote comes into the tent, and they take out the hanger, and it looks like he's going to torture. Yeah. And it just turns out to be, because it didn't work in 1941. So Spielberg does the same gag, but this time to much better effect.
And one of my favorite movie transitions of all time, truck? What truck? And then you cut to the truck. There's no screwing around. You're just truck, what truck? And then you're with the truck, and you're
and then that
John Williams
and then
music.
That cue,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
The Desert Chase. How many times did you listen to the Desert Chase on vinyl?
I
when yeah, totally. I mean, and that was always my favorite cue was Desert Chase.
Yeah, because that was the cue that they used in the TV commercials.
Yeah, so great, so great. Okay, well, listen, what a year, and look at all the movies we didn't pick that were terrific. I mean, it shows you why the 80s, along with the 30s and the 70s, really one of the great decades for film. What?
Oh, never mind. Never mind.
No. What? So, look, it is always a pleasure to do these panels at Comic-Con. I think for all of us, we can't wait to do it for you again live next year in front of an audience where we can all be together again. Thankfully, this dreadful, awful pandemic, it's not ended, but it seems to be on the wane, and certainly the hope that we can all be together in person at Comic-Con is something that we will really look forward to. We've missed you, and for fans, who enjoy these panels, we encourage you to come and listen to our podcast, The 430 Movie, which is available every Friday wherever you listen to podcasts. We do shows like this every week. If you're a fan of animation and like what Ashley had to say about heavy metal, you may want to listen to Cartoon Barroom, an animated podcast hosted by Ashley Miller and Mr. Stephen Melching. And maybe you're a Star Trek fan. Maybe you like that Star Trek movie. And if that's the case, you don't want to miss Inglorious Treksperts, hosted by Darren Dochterman and myself, as we talk about almost everything in the Star Trek universe. So you want to check that out wherever you listen to podcasts as well. And you can watch all these shows on video on the free Electric Now app. So download it. Even a child could use it. It's very simple. You download the app and you can watch on demand not only these wonderful podcasts, but tons of entertainment, TV shows, movies, and stuff from the Electric Library. But for now, I want to remind you what we picked for 1981 week. On Monday, Steve.
It's Ray Harryhausen's Clash of the Titans.
On Tuesday, Darren Document,
it's The Amazing Dragon Slayer.
On Wednesday, Ashley Miller's pick,
Heavy Metal.
On Thursday, it's Excalibur. And on Friday, we finished 1981 in style with the great
On the
Raiders
Golden Pond.
on Golden Pond. That's right. Kate Hepburn and Henry Fonda in Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's a whole different movie. So that's an amazing week. We could easily go into the weekend with some additions, but we won't. But this is an incredible week of films. 1981 is a great year, and next year we'll be back with the towering achievement that is 1982.
Hopefully in person.
Hopefully in person. That is certainly our expectation. But we want to thank you for joining us for Comic-Con at Home. We want to thank our friends at Comic-Con for once again giving us this opportunity to share, our passion with you all. And I want to thank, obviously, Dylan Middlebrook, who prepared the video for this, the great Bill Ritter and Mark Rivera for the sound mixing, and everyone at Electric who makes the show possible. So thank you. So until next Friday, and until next July, when we return to Comic-Con live and in person, Eyewitness News starts now.
A pretty face reflected in a mirror, so perfect in every way. With every move, the picture's getting clearer. She's got it all, she's got it made. But when she smiles, is she really smiling? She's the only one who really knows. Emerald eyes, so cool and so inviting. Hide the side, she never shows. She's a looker, that's what they say. She's got it all, yeah, she's got it made. She's a looker with a beautiful face, always on display. The magazines always show her smiling, so perfect in every way. But in the night, I hear a young girl crying. She's got it all,
This show is produced by Dean Devlin and Mark A. Altman and is an Electric Surge Network production.